The emergency broadcast pierced through the quantum-fold communication network like a scream in the void. On Verdania, Chief Agricultural Coordinator Sci-Fi pressed his four-fingered hands against the transmitter with desperate urgency. His crystalline skin flickering between pale blue and deep purple, the Verdanian equivalent of tears. "This is Verdania Prime to the Galactic Mercy Corps," he transmitted, his voice crackling through the deteriorating atmosphere. "Category 7 ecological collapse in progress. Terraforming matrix has achieved critical cascade failure. Estimated planetary death in 72 standard hours. We have 14 million civilians requiring immediate evacuation or environmental stabilization. Please respond." 3,000 light-years away, the message bounced through 17 relay stations, each one automatically routing it toward the nearest Mercy Corps facility. But a single corrupted data packet in the Rigel sector caused a fatal redirect. Instead of reaching the gentle, telepathic healers of the Mercy Corps, the distress call landed in the inbox of Earth's Disaster Response Division, a small government agency that wasn't supposed to exist in any galactic database. Captain Sarah Chun was reviewing flood damage reports from the Pacific Northwest when her secure terminal chimed with an incoming message. The translation software struggled with the alien language, but the urgency was unmistakable. She frowned at the star charts, ran the coordinates through their classified navigation system, and felt her heart sink. "Martinez, get in here," she called to her operations chief. "We've got a situation." Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez, a former firefighter from Los Angeles, studied the message with growing confusion. "Captain, this can't be right. Agricultural world. Environmental collapse. 14 million people?" She looked up. "Are we really equipped for something like this?" Sarah pulled up Earth's disaster response protocols. Since making quiet contact with galactic civilization 6 months ago, they'd been preparing for exactly this scenario, though they'd expected their first off-world mission to be much smaller in scope. "We have the team. Question is, can we get there in time?" Within 2 hours, the DSV Resilience launched from Earth's hidden orbital platform. The crew of 12 included agricultural engineer Dr. James Park, who'd spent years developing crops. For Mars colonies, paramedic specialist Lisa Thompson, veteran of 3 major earthquake disasters. Search and rescue coordinator Tom Bradley, who'd pulled survivors from collapsed buildings across 4 continents. And chief engineer Mike O'Brien, who could repair anything with enough coffee and profanity. As they entered hyperspace, none of them realized they were about to become the galaxy's most unlikely heroes, or that their arrival would fundamentally change how an entire universe viewed the concept of disaster relief. The Resilience dropped out of hyperspace to a site that defied every disaster protocol in their manual. Verdania hung before them like a jewel cracked by a hammer, its surface a chaotic patchwork of colors that shifted and writhed like something alive. What should have been the soft green of agricultural plains now pulsed with violent purples, blood reds, and sickly yellows. "Jesus Christ," whispered Dr. Park, staring at the sensor readings. "The atmospheric composition is changing by the minute. Oxygen levels are spiking and crashing randomly. How is anything still alive down there?" Captain Chun opened communication. "Channels. Verdania Prime. This is Earth Disaster Response. We're here to assist with your emergency situation." The response came back in a mixture of relief and horror. "Earth? But ... But you're quarantined. You're Deathworlders. We requested the Mercy Corps." "Well, we're what you got," Sarah replied calmly. "What's your immediate situation?" "Coordinator." Sci-Fi's voice crackled through the cone. "The terraforming nanites have mutated beyond all control. They're converting our agricultural zones into something ... else. The plants are growing enormous and aggressive. The atmospheric processors, are producing toxic compounds. Temperature regulation has completely failed. We've lost contact with 17 farming communities. Tom Bradley studied the surface scans and felt his rescue instincts kick in. Those missing communities, are people still alive down there? We don't know. The environment is too hostile for our survey teams. We've evacuated everyone we can to the polar cities, but they're overcrowded and running out of supplies. Lisa Thompson checked her medical kit and shook her head. 17 communities. That could be thousands of people trapped down there. She looked at the captain. We have to try. Mike O'Brien was already suiting up. I can get the atmospheric processors back online, but I'll need to do it manually. Someone's got to get me to the main facility. Dr. Park pulled up the planetary schematics. The good news is, I think I know what went wrong with the terraforming matrix. The bad news is, fixing it means going right into the heart of the chaos. Zone. Captain Shun looked at her team, 12 humans against an entire world gone mad. Any sane species would have declared it impossible. But humans had built their entire civilization on the principle that impossible was just another word for challenging. All right, people, she said. Let's show the galaxy how Earth handles disaster relief. Asterisk, the shuttle lifeline, screamed through Verdania's tortured atmosphere like a meteor in reverse, its heat shields glowing cherry red as Captain Shun fought to keep it stable. The air outside was a poison cocktail of methane, sulfur compounds, and something that made their sensors display error messages in 3 languages. Landing zone is, well, it's approximately where the town of Kepler Falls used to be, announced Dr. Park, his voice tight with concentration. Now it appears to be occupied by what I can only describe as a forest of carnivorous skyscrapers. Through the viewports, they could see the results of the terraforming disaster. Plants that should have been wheat stalks now towered 200 feet into the air, their surfaces covered in thorns the size of telephone poles. The wheat heads had been replaced by massive, snapping maws lined with crystalline teeth. The entire landscape writhed and moved like something from a fever dream. Atmospheric reading shows 400% oxygen concentration, reported Lisa Thompson. That's going to make everything extremely flammable. Also, the temperature just dropped 60 degrees in the last 30 seconds. Tom Bradley was already checking. His rescue gear. Motion sensors show life signs in what used to be the town center. At least 40 people, maybe more, holed up in some kind of underground shelter. The shuttle touched down with a bone-jarring impact, immediately sinking 6 inches into ground that had the consistency of wet cement. Captain Shun killed the engines and looked back at her team. Remember, we're not just representing Earth here. We're representing the entire concept of disaster response to a galaxy that thinks we're too dangerous to let out of our solar system. Mike. O'Brien grinned and hefted his toolkit. No pressure, right? The moment they stepped outside, Verdania tried to kill them. The air was so thick with toxins that it would have dropped a Verdanian in seconds, but the humans' enhanced environment. Suits filtered it like a mild pollutant. The gravity fluctuations that had been crushing survey equipment randomly turned out to be manageable if you just kept your center of balance low and moved with purpose. The main atmospheric processor is 2 clicks north, Dr. Park announced. Consulting his scanner. We'll have to go through the ... the murder forest. I love how we're all just accepting murder forest as a technical term now. Lisa muttered, but she was already moving toward the towering plant monsters. Happened next would become legend in disaster response circles across the galaxy. Tom Bradley simply walked up to one of the giant carnivorous plants and, when it lunged at him with building-sized jaws, punched it in what he accurately assessed was its nose. The plant recoiled in shock apparently, nothing in it's genetically modified. Existence had prepared it for the concept of prey that punched back. Huh, Tom said thoughtfully. I think they're more afraid of us than we are of them. The underground shelter beneath Kepler Falls had become a tomb of crystalline beauty and absolute terror. 43 Verdanian civilians huddled in what had once been the town's cultural center, their bioluminescent skin dimmed to almost nothing. To conserve energy, the air recycling system had failed 6 hours ago, and their emergency food supplies were running dangerously low. "The humans are coming," whispered Elder Nethara, her ancient voice carrying both hope and dread. The communications array picked up their transmissions. "They're walking through the death zones as if they were, strolling through a park." Above them, the sound of metal being torn apart echoed through the shelter. The Verdanians pressed against each other in fear, expecting the mutated plants to finally break through their defenses. Instead, they heard something even more terrifying. Cheerful human voices. "Found the entrance." Tom Bradley's voice boomed through the shelter's speakers. "It's buried under about 3 tons of crystallized plant matter, but nothing a little. Percussive maintenance won't fix." The sound of heavy machinery followed, except it wasn't machinery. It was Mike O'Brien using a piece of the atmospheric processor as a crowbar, while Lisa Thompson provided medical commentary on the proper way to lift heavy objects without injuring your back. When the shelter door finally opened, the Verdanians found themselves face to face with their rescuers. The humans were covered in plant sap, atmospheric condensation, and what appeared to be the crystallized remains of several deadly toxins. They should have been dead 17 times over. Instead, they were smiling. "Afternoon, folks," said Tom Bradley, as if he regularly rescued people from interdimensional plant monsters. "We're here to get you out of this mess. Now we've got good news and bad news. The good news is we've figured out how to fix your terraforming problem. The bad news is you're going to have to trust us to carry you through about 2 kilometers of what our engineer has technically classified as weaponized agriculture." Elder Nethara stepped forward, her voice trembling. You walked through the chaos zones? Nothing can survive out there. The atmospheric readings alone." "Yeah, about that," interrupted Dr. Park, consulting his tablet. "Your atmospheric processors were designed for Verdanian physiology. Turns out, what's lethally toxic to you is just mildly uncomfortable to us. Also, we've jury-rigged a solution using parts from our shuttle and what appears to be a really large flower." Lisa Thompson was already conducting medical triage, her scanner revealing that half the Verdanians were suffering from atmospheric poisoning. "We can treat the toxin exposure, but we need to get you to our ship's medical bay. The antidote is basically a mild earth antihistamine, but in concentrated doses." What followed was the most surreal rescue operation in galactic history. The humans simply picked up the Verdanians' adults, children, elderly, and sick, and carried them through the murder forest like parents carrying sleepy children. When the carnivorous plants attacked, the humans either punched them, kicked them, or in one memorable case, Mike O'Brien simply stared at a building-sized Venus flytrap until it retreated in what could only be described as embarrassment. 6 hours later, Vergania's atmospheric processors hummed with steady efficiency for the first time in 3 days. The runaway terraforming matrix had been reset using what Dr. Park cheerfully called aggressive percussive recalibration, a process that involved Mike O'Brien hitting things with a wrench until they worked properly. In the medical bay of the Resilience, 43 Verdanians were recovering from their ordeal, their bioluminescent skin gradually returning to healthy hues as Lisa Thompson's treatments took effect. The antidote had indeed been a simple earth antihistamine, a fact that would require several academic papers to fully explain. Coordinator Zephy High stood on the observation deck, watching the planet's surface slowly return to normal. The carnivorous plants were shrinking back to their original size, The atmospheric toxins were being processed out of the air, and the temperature fluctuations were stabilizing. It was a miracle of engineering and determination. "I don't understand," he said to Captain Shun. "Every simulation, every model, every expert in the galaxy said that what you did was impossible. The environmental conditions should have killed you instantly." Sarah Chun looked out at the healing world and shrugged. "Maybe that's the difference between us and the rest of the galaxy. We don't really believe in impossible. We just believe in difficult." Tom Bradley joined them, still covered in plant sap and grinning. "You know what's funny? Back home, this would barely qualify as a Category 3 disaster. Remember the Yellowstone eruption? Or the Antarctic ice shelf collapse? This was just Tuesday for us." The communication system chimed with an incoming message. The real Galactic Mercy Corps had finally received the distress call and was requesting permission to assist. Their estimated arrival time was 3 days. "What should I tell them?" asked the communications officer. Captain Chun looked at her Team 12 humans who had just saved 14 million lives using nothing but determination, improvisation, and a willingness to punch hostile plants. "Tell them thanks, but we've got this one handled. And tell them that Earth's Disaster Response Division is officially available for future emergencies." Dr. Park was already planning the next phase of the operation. "We'll need to establish monitoring stations, train local teams in atmospheric management, and probably leave behind some emergency supplies." Standard post-disaster protocol. Elder Nephara approached the human captain, her ancient eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "The galaxy has spent millennia debating what constitutes true mercy. We believed it was gentleness, advanced technology, careful planning. But you've shown us something different." "What's that?" asked Sarah. "Sometimes mercy is simply the willingness to walk into hell and start fixing things with your bare hands. Sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy is also the most determined to help others survive." 3 days later, when the Galactic Mercy Corps arrived with their advanced healing ships and telepathic counselors, they found a world that no longer needed saving. They found something even more remarkable, a new definition of disaster relief that would reshape how the galaxy approached emergency response. And in the depths of space, Earth's Disaster Response Division was already receiving their next distress call from a mining colony trapped in a black hole's event horizon, convinced that no one in the universe was crazy enough to attempt a rescue. They were about to be proven very, very wrong. Asterisk.